Beth, it was kind of comical when you said, hey, has anybody been asked their ACT score this week? I actually was asked my ACT score this week because a lot of our kids just got them back, and so they said, hey, Mr. Farris, what'd you make? And they got real quiet, you know. And I rounded up to the next 10. I had to round up a long ways to get to that 10, but here we are, right? So I know oftentimes you go to something and you're sitting there, you're just taking notes like crazy, or they're giving you a handout and they'll say, hey, don't worry, everything I say is going to be on these slides and I'm going to send those to you later. And you immediately just, okay, nothing I say today is going to be on a slide, okay? It won't be coming later, all right? So if it's any good and it hits you, you're going to have to write it down, and we're going to go really, really quickly. I was in D.C. all this week with some of our 8th graders, and did not have a lot of extra time to make a keynote that Lane asked me to do, and so I apologize for that. Okay, so Lane kind of got into it a little bit, and I want to tell you how I got into this. So early in my career in education, maybe 20 years ago, I got very frustrated as I was seeing how, and this would have been before I even had a child, but I was seeing how evil and the world was getting to our kids' hearts and minds before we were in terms of sexual talk, okay? In terms of talks about God's plan for sex. And it really, really bothered me. Because I know what we would do. We would always go, and this is, like I say, 20 years ago, we'd go, well, you know, we can't talk to them at that age. It's not really appropriate, okay? And then, you know, and then, sure enough, we would do sex ed in 8th grade or 9th grade. You remember those days? I mean, that was a long time ago. And that's what would happen. And so, but I saw we were always trying to be real cautious. We have to wait till it's appropriate for them, okay? And then I was seeing Satan never says that, right? He never says, man, I just don't think Preston can handle that. You know, he's 10. I don't, you know, maybe we shouldn't have that thing pop up on the iPad, okay? We're getting beat to the punch. And that was 20 years ago I felt that. And so that's when I started diving into that and trying to learn as much as I can about healthy ways to share that. Lane, in fact, started at Westbury Christian teaching 6th grade boys Bible. William Washington was in there with me. And we went through a book called Preparing for Adolescence by Dr. James Dobson. I'm sure there's some great books out there now that are even better than that, but that has been a strong, strong foundation for me at schools with my own kids, just talking them through what's going to happen as your body starts to change, and then it goes on into the sex talk. Never does it, you know, everybody says, well, it talks about bird or bee. It talks about all the birds and bees, but it just never mentions the word bird nor bee, okay? It's the words. And so that really got me going. And so then, as I start to progress in my education and in our world and in our culture, we hit this moment where there's just a lot coming up about homosexuality, okay? And this is when it was just 2 letters of the acronym, right? And so we would talk about that all the time, and every time it would come up in an admin meeting on, hey, what are we going to do? We need to address this with our students. There's students asking, and I would always go, yeah, we need to get to that. Let's talk about the pep rally on Friday. Okay? And I'm telling you, I put my head in the sand on it. Okay? I did not want to bring that up. I thought, there's so many of them don't know what we're talking about. And we'll bring it up, and parents will say this. And I'm telling you, one, I just decided I'm going to go with what I learned early on. It's wrong. I'll just do that. And I don't want to talk about it. Okay? Well, then life progresses, and here Tammy and I are now. We have 5 children. Okay, and so we had 4 at the time. We were getting ready to, our 5th one was getting ready to be born, and it dawned on me, because I'm constantly looking at stats and data and research, and I'm like, man, I got 5 kids. Okay, if you just do the normal stats, right? I'm probably not going to go 5'5", right? So when you think about things that teens and young adults and kids go through, like, our chances are high we're going to go through something. One of my kids is going to walk through the door one day and say, okay? And I have a desire to really, really do that well, whatever it is. So about 4 years ago, I told God, I said, God, I want to start studying this. I want to dive into this, and I want to shed away any bias that I have from the way I was taught or brought up. And I want you to show me what your word says about this. And I'm not kidding you. It started something when I told Lane. It started something. That's all I read about. My wife, she makes fun of me. We'll have everybody tucked into bed. And so it's finally chill time. She's going to watch a little bit of Netflix. She's like, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to read some of my books. And she knows what that means. I'm going to read on transgender or gender dysphoria. This one, I was on the plane. If you want to get people not to talk to you, carry books like this on the plane. This one is called Love Thy Body. That's the one I was reading, to and from D.C. And it's answering hard questions about life and sexuality. And so one of my 8th graders was sitting beside me on the plane, and I'm just into it. I'm reading. He goes, hey, Mr. Farris, what are you reading? I said, well, right now I'm reading about what the Bible says about transgenderism. I said, you got any thoughts on that? And he's, we didn't say another word the whole time. But, so that's where I'm at. So I'm not telling you I'm an expert at all. I'm with you, right? I'm walking this. I've got a 5, 7, 10, 17, and 19-year-old. And so I'm walking this too, and I have no degrees in any of this. Very, very low on the qualification, but I do have a passion to want to do this really, really well. And I'm not scared to be told that I'm wrong, or the way I was raised was wrong, or some thinking was wrong. I want to really, really learn about this. So I'm just going to do some general stuff today, but ultimately it's going to mix, having the sex talk and then the gender stuff. It's going to kind of all be mixed together, okay? I didn't want to split them up. All right, so 6th grade boys Bible. Sorry, I got to look through my notes here. You could be looking through them too if I had slides, but let me ask you this. So initially, how were you told about sex? And this is what I mean about it. Like Ben just said, the reframing or the projection, okay? How was sex projected to you when you learned it? Was it a good thing, or was it a bad, shameful thing? Okay? All right, that's your two choices. Okay? Let's raise our hand. Who feels like they got a healthy, godly version of sex presented to them as a child? Okay? That's very, very good. Y'all should be up here teaching it. Who thinks that they got, it was just presented in a way where it was a wrong or dirty or kind of a shameful thing? Okay? We've got some people in here that have their parents in here, and so they chose not to vote. But I noticed that. I'm not going to call anybody out. But, yeah, so that's the way it was presented to me. Actually, I had a neighbor down the street, a little bit older. He taught me and my buddy about it one day in a tree house. It was all truth and details. Okay? I found out later there was no truth. A lot of details, but no truth. Okay? But in my house, it was always, we don't talk about that. It's bad. It's, and I never heard the good of that or God's plan for that. And so, I'll be honest, once I got married, that did not go away. Because in my mind, I had been taught all the time, that's not good. That's not, stay away from that. And so, I want to do that, and I want all of us to do that better than it was done to me. Okay? I want to really, really do that well as we talk to them. And so, I want to look at some ways that our culture is specifically attacking the hearts and minds of our kids in this moment right now. One, and you guys know this, you have kids, but they're being told that sex is made for pleasure and can be used however we like. Okay? There are no consequences. It's made totally for you. You do you, whoever that means, whatever that means, and there's no consequences to it. And I'm not just talking about STDs or being pregnant. I'm talking about the mental side of the consequences of the bonding that's taking place and the dangers that is. So they're just being told it's very, very casual. You don't have to love somebody to do that. Okay? Now, in all of this, and I'm sure you've seen the news, you could look stuff up. I could give you enough stats that you would leave out of here the most depressed you've ever been. With what's happening to our kids in terms of their hearts and minds, with this gender dysphoria, with what's happening in their value and the way they look at sex. I could also give you some amazing stats. Okay? In fact, I read this one the other day. From a recent poll, 2% of college students that started last year in college, 2% in this poll said that they had gender dysphoria. Whether that means they were transsexual, whether that means they were, in any of that, it was 2%. Now, I don't know about you, but the way I feel is it's 98%. And the 2% is the people trying to do it God's way. And so I think that's good news. But either way, we could do stats and we could sell whatever side of it we were selling. I don't want to get into all that. I would caution you. I very rarely Google stuff because one, I've got a school computer, and so that doesn't look good coming up. But two, it creates there's people in this room that could really, really break this down. I'm just doing it the dummy way. It knows what you're searching for, and it's going to give you more of that, right? And so if I'm looking for God's plan, or what does God think about homosexuality, well, I just keep getting fed more of that. It's an echo chamber of your way is right, okay? And so I don't want to do that. I do think that makes us get too narrow focused sometimes. I do look for people I respect in this area that have respectful thoughts and that really, really challenge me. And then I take book recommendations because the book doesn't, track me down and throw another book in my face, okay? And so I would caution you on that. I do think it's very real, but like with most anything, it's probably not as bad as we think it is. And it's also probably not as good as we think it is. Does that make sense? It's just it's a bell curve. It's kind of in the middle. It's very similar to the white man syndrome. Y'all remember that? You know what I'm talking about with that? We probably all experienced it, but as news media became more national, we had these kidnappings happening in the 70s and early 80s. And it was always someone in a white van that was taking these kids. And all the research shows that parents started bringing their kids in closer inside the house, where we could tell stories of growing up where it's like, what? You all had a machete? And yeah, I'm like, we didn't leave the house without a machete. And but because of the exposure nationally, everybody thought that's going to happen. The moment my child turns the corner and gets out of my sight, boom, somebody pulls up, grabs him, and takes off. Okay? Now that stuff is real, and it really does happen. But it's not happening every time they get out of your sight. Well, the same thing on this. That's what I was told years ago when we were struggling. As phones started to take over people's lives with pornography, they said, Casey, be careful. Every time a middle school boy is looking at his phone does not mean he's looking at porn. But that's what I want to say. Quit looking at your phone. We're trying to pray and you're looking at your phone. And I was just assuming it was something bad all the time. So I want us to start there. Just be careful about what you're reading and who you're going to, that you're not just creating an echo chamber. The next thing is, they're being very strongly just flooded with information about how their body does not have value. Okay? Their biological body does not have value. Okay, and this is very, very scary when you can start to think about where this is going to go long term. But that's something that's being sold to them, and it's really how they're being sold this is there's a 2-level worldview. Okay, so so pretend like it's a 2-story home. Okay, on the bottom floor there's facts. Okay, there's truisms, there's science, this is truly it. And then on the second floor, it's how I feel. Okay? It's what I think. Well, I mean, you can think that or not, but that's not true. But that's what I think. And that's how I feel. And that has flipped to where that's more powerful now. In their eyes and in the world's eyes that is flooding them with this is how I think and feel overrides fact. And that's, you start to look at when we do not value the body, okay? In fact, there's a couple of Supreme Court cases, and this goes back a while. Some of you may know this better than me, but where they started to defend, separate human. So when is a child a human, and when are they a person? That's 2 separate things. And even science now, a lot of times when you're hearing about the abortion debate, they're going, okay, we'll give it to you. We'll give it to you. The child is alive at conception. We'll give it to you. We know that. Enough science has proved it. But the thing is, they're not a person yet. And then when they define person, they say, well, that's someone who can think, who can create, who can contribute in a way. Okay? So up until then, they're just a human. They're not a person. So they're disposable until they're a person. That's the same thing that works on the other end too, right? As they grow, and we all are going to get there, where we're not contributing a lot there at the end. We're kind of a burden, I hate y'all having to do this, I keep forgetting this, whatever. Do they suddenly go from personhood to human again? And so they're not being taught to value human life and the body because it's more feeling and what I want it to be. A young woman who identifies as non-binary said this. It says, it doesn't matter what living meat skeleton you've been born in. It's what you feel that defines you. The body has been demoted to a meaningless lump of flesh and bones. And actually, as I was reading more on this, meat skeleton, that word's coming up a lot recently. That's how they're describing body. You see how objective, how there's no feeling to that? It makes it so much easier just I have no value for you because I don't value any of that. This is a Princeton University professor who wrote a book defending transgender ideology. He says, what the real physical body tells us is nothing. It has no meaning at all. Okay, that's the second floor being more powerful than the bottom floor. Okay, and then also, I really feel like these kids are getting hit hard. And Johnny talked about it earlier when they talked about identity. And we've been saying for years, because I love working with middle schoolers, is that's when they're trying to figure out their identity. Forget the sex part, forget the gender part. That's what's happening there. Prefrontal cortex is starting to develop, and they don't know. That's why one day, this is a long time ago, but they would, they'd be in the jocks group for a little while. And then they'd be in the skateboarding group for a little while. And then they'd be in the, I'm going to read a lot they just kept jumping around because they were trying to figure out where they are. Oh, to go back to that stage, right? That's fabulous. I like those 3 groups. And so, but now they're being pushed to, one, they have no idea who they are. And they're going to change that feeling daily. Okay? But they're being pushed to, you got to tell us now. You got to tell us who you are right now. And the damage that's happening is, okay, so let's say it's the gender part, and let's say this is the line, and they go, okay, I'm this. Okay. At 13, that's what they say. I'm this. Okay? Let's say they don't start taking medicine. Let's say they don't have a surgery. That's just how they say, and that's how they live for a little while, because they're confused. They're all confused. But they've made this statement, I am whatever, fill in the blank. Well, that's hard to step back over there when it's time to go to prom. And suddenly you don't feel that way anymore. You're back over here. And it's kind of like, I don't think I can go to prom with you, because you remember, for 2 years you were saying this. And so it's causing them to, to write in permanent marker when they just need to be writing in pencil. Or maybe in crayon. It's just messing up all the time. And so, it feels very much like we live in one extreme or the other. Okay, you can't just, I tell our middle school kids a lot, hey listen, you don't have to say something about everything. People can ask you, well, what do you think about that? Just say, I don't really have a thought on it. I've not thought about it. I said, that's okay. You don't have to vote for everything. But when I think of everything in extreme, I think of the story of Jacob and Esau. If you'll remember that, Esau comes in, he goes out, he's been hunting, and he comes in, and this is in Genesis 25, and he says this. He says Esau came from the field and was famished. Okay? That's my kids all the time. Right after they are famished. Okay? And Esau said to Jacob, please let me have a quick swallow of that soup, because I am exhausted and famished. Okay? He's tired. He's been hunting. Okay? He's tired. And Jacob answers, first sell me your birthright, the right of the firstborn. What? Wait a minute, what? I just asked you for a little bit of soup, and you jump all the way over there to the birthright, the most valuable thing I have? Well, then Esau jumps in there with him. If we're going to be extreme, he said, look, I'm about to die if I do not eat soon. Wait a minute, we went from exhausted and famished to I'm about to die if I don't eat soon? And now we're trading birthrights? Like, that escalated very, very quickly. That's what I feel like is happening with our kids all the time. It is, you've got to make a stance, you've got to make one now, and then you're stuck. So how do we talk to our kids about this? One, I think we got to start the conversation as early as possible. As early as possible. You know your child better than anyone. And I think it's your job to do it. My job to do it as well with my kids. But start it as early as possible. And the best way I've ever heard it described, some of y'all may have seen this. My wife told me about it years ago. But it's like a sponge. Okay, so pretend that, and kids are sponges, you know that. But pretend this sponge is just about God's plan for sex, sexuality, all of that. Okay? And if we take that, we take a pitcher of water, it's a dry sponge, and we just go, and just dump it like that. Okay? What does it do to that sponge? Have you ever done that to a sponge? The sponge doesn't even get wet. It can't absorb it. It happened too quickly. And that's just, I'm going to go into my son's, he's in 4th grade. I'm going to go in his room, and when I come out of that room, he's going to know everything he needs to know. Just, okay? That doesn't work. So what I've heard is, what you do is, you pour a little bit into the sponge. A little bit. Just a little bit of truth all along the way. So then, it gets full of truth. Okay? God's truth. And then when something else comes in, we're say, Mom, today at school I heard blah, 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 blah. It looks weird or seems weird, and there's not really a spot to put that. But you understand, the flip of that is happening. I'm sorry, I'm bad on the tripod guy. I know. The flip of that is happening. The flip is happening, right? They're getting that thing so full with craziness that when we start to present it, when they're appropriate, when we start to present it, that seems crazy. And so you've got to start as early as possible. Johnny was on it earlier, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. But I will caution you about this. You got to figure out what they already know. Okay? You got to figure out what they already know. You may jump to chapter 5, and they're on 1. You may come in at 1, and they're on 5. So you have to figure out what they know. I'll give you an example. So Preston and I, my 4th grader, He hates it when I talk about it, by the way, on stage. My daughter, Haley Rose, who is 5, she always gets on to me if I don't tell a Haley Rose story. So Preston doesn't want to be talked about, so don't tell him. But we're shooting Nerf baskets the other night before bed, and that's our best time to talk, right? There's no, it's just, we're chill. He gets talking a little bit, and so I start talking. I'm like, I got this talk coming up. I at least got to talk to my own kid before I talk to these people at church about this. And so I start talking to him about sex. I said, son, do you ever hear that at school? No. I said, well, you're probably getting close to age where you're going to start to hear that. But he's really shooting now. He is concentrating on that shooting. And so, we ended up going, and I said, well, and we just go back to the garden, right? I said, you realize now, God made 2 types of people. He made male, and He made female, right? And you realize, what do you have to make a baby? And he said, a mom and a dad. I said, there you go. That's exactly right. I'm the dad, mom's the mom, and here y'all are. And I said, well, how does that? I said, God made male and female different. Because he's got little sisters. He knows, right? And he said, yeah, Dad, I know. And I said, well, no. And I said, I said, well, that's the part that helps make the baby. And he goes, oh. And I said, actually, a little bit before that, I asked him, I said, well, then, if you have a man and you have one, I said, do you know what parts do that? He said, yeah, Dad, I know. I'm like, uh-oh. And he said, their bellies. They just rub their bellies together. And I said, that's exactly what happened. I'll let your mom take it from there. And then the other day, Ansley, she said, we listen to Caleb all the time. We're trying to get the questions right on the trivia in the morning. And so we're listening to Caleb all the time. And all of a sudden I heard Ansley, my 7-year-old, and she said, oh, Dad, he just said the bad SH word. I'm like, Caleb? I turned it down. I said, what, honey? And now everybody's quiet in the car. And she said, the man on the radio just said the bad SH word. And I said, what? She said, Dad, I'm not going to say it. And I said, well, can you give me a hint? And she said, no, Dad, I'm embarrassing. It's the bad SH word. And I said, does it rhyme with it? And she said, no, shut up. And then she sat back there going, shh, it. So be careful. Be careful. You want to find out. Some of y'all just getting that. You put those 2 syllables together. You want to find out what they know before you just start pouring in. And then I say, I put it on here, just pray for dumb time. That's what I call it, just dumb time. What are y'all doing? What are y'all talking about? We're not really doing anything, but we're doing a lot, right? We're throwing sticks in the pond, or we're walking somewhere. Just spend as much time in those things. I think Johnny talked about it earlier. It's going to come up. Things will come up, and you look for opportunities for stuff like that to come up. Okay? It doesn't always have to be, can you come in here, me and your mom want to talk about something with you? Okay? In fact, I'd say it should never be that. But just pray for dumb time. I think you need to make sure we sell it as God's plan. We teach it from that aspect, and that God's plan is perfect. Therefore, making His love for us perfect. So if there's a plan, He's got a plan for our life, it's because He only wants what's best for us. And you can talk to your kids about that, because that's how you feel about them. I've heard this one too. If you have an older one that has younger siblings, try to reflect some of that on how they feel about their younger. Like, would you want them doing something dangerous? My teenagers get on to me all the time about something I'm letting my little kids do. Dad, you can't let them do that. And they're out there just mama bearing out there. And so sometimes when they can see, oh, okay, that makes sense, because I would not want Ansley doing that. Or doing something dangerous. That's what that rule is for. Well, there's guidelines that God gives us to have the most the most, as we were talking about earlier, successful, healthy life. And then, as He wants what's best for us, I also think point out where the world is broken, okay? And just call it that. I think we have to separate behavior from a person from their behavior, okay? Point out where the world is broken. Say, a lot of times people struggle with that because the world is broken, and that is their struggle. We have to be great listeners. We all know this, and we probably feel this way as well, but for sure with kids will always gravitate to where they feel loved and they feel listened to. That's where they're going to go. They don't need a sermon. They don't need to be judged. They just feel loved and listened to. I used to hear that all the time about middle schoolers. It said they will go to the oldest person in the room that will listen to them. That's why the cheerleading coach always has that gaggle of girls around her, because she listens to those stories, right? And so, and then, as you're listening, tell them, hey, tell me more. Tell me more. What'd you feel when that happened? You've got to keep asking them questions, and don't do like me. Don't try to be solving it all the time. Okay? Just continuing to listen to them. I would verify their feelings. And then we have to teach. Feelings can deceive. Feelings can change. And we have to teach them to discern the difference between truth and feelings. Okay? And we can give examples in our own life. With gender dysphoria, I've heard this. When I first started diving into this, I was talking to a lot of schools, a lot of them out west that was, a few years ahead of us, 10 years ahead of us or so on it. And they told me this, and this is stuck to this day. They said, Casey, if you have dealt with one kid with gender dysphoria, you have dealt with one kid with gender dysphoria. It's all different. So there is no blanket statements on, well, you always do this with them if they're struggling with that. You got to listen, and you got to be there, and you got to support them and get to know and try to find out deeper level where some of this pain is coming from. These kids very well could be our sons, our daughters, our kids' best friends, our nieces, our nephews. Next, we got to use positive language. I know it was always told to me, do not. Actually, it was said like this. My mom used to say this. She'll be at my house here in a few minutes. We're having a little graduation party today. But I can hear her saying this. You better not ever let me catch you fill in the blank. Whether it be drinking, smoking, sex, whatever it was. I just knew I better not ever let my mom catch me doing that. So I was never doing any of that because I thought it was a better way. I was never not doing any of that because I thought I was doing most of that out of fear. Well, listen, as you get older, that fear leaves. I moved to Houston, Texas. My mom lives in Alabama. That's 700 miles. She's not going to catch me doing anything. And so we have to teach them out of a love and out of respect for God, this is the better way. And not just the don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. In fact, that was the first lie that Satan used, right? So in the garden, how many trees did God say you could not eat of? How many? One. Okay. Garden full of trees. Full of trees. Had one. They always say, well, following God, you got too many rules. There's all these no's. I'm like, no. He started this thing out with all yeses. One no. All yeses, one no. Satan comes and said, is it true that God said you couldn't eat of any of these trees? And that's the way it's tried to present to us, right? This is not better because look at what you're missing. Look at and so we have to be the yes and the joy and the positive as we're selling it to them, teaching them. And then establish, you can always ask me anything and I will always tell you the truth. Okay? I will tell you this as a parent. That's much harder to do with your own children. Now, I'm in education, and I tell our kids that all the time. Listen, I will always tell you the truth. You come ask me anything you want to ask me, I will tell you the truth. And I realize that's tough for a kid to come ask their parent anything. And if they will do that with you, kudos. That's awesome. But that's where I think you've got to surround them with trusted adults that they do feel comfortable enough asking about that information, that would give the same type of answer you would give. That's why a church community is so important. Okay? I've talked to kids before about way more than they would ever tell their parents. And I've helped them get to the point where they share some of that with their parents. And so try to be as objective as you can on that. I know it's very, very hard, but they will see he's not going to lie. I can tell you a story about Preston and Santa Claus this year on how I got convicted on that. That'll have to be for the next seminar. And then next is, what are we modeling for our children? Beth talked about it. You know, we're projecting something, right? And especially when you think about gender dysphoria. There's a lot of hateful, harmful words and descriptions and attitudes that your kids are going to immediately know how you feel about that. And just like Beth said, they're listening all the time. They're listening and watching all the time. So how you handle things on social media, how you handle things with speech, do you show grace and truth? Okay, they're watching that, and they're watching for things that you label on other kids. Then they're assuming that's how they're going to be labeled if they have this struggle or whatever it is. They will know then. It says they are a child of God. Oh no, this is what I wrote this down for. So if maybe that comes up, hey, so-and-so saying that she has a girlfriend, well, all I know is this. I don't know all of that, but all I know is this. I know she is a child of God. And I know we all go through struggles. We're trying to figure some stuff out. Okay? That way, when they start to try to struggle with something, they know, okay, I'm still a child of God. And this is just a struggle I'm going through right now. Okay? And they don't automatically go, I can't tell them because I've heard what they've always said about X, whatever it is. So in conclusion, I want to ask you this, because I've messed this up for a long time. What should we be praying for our children? You know, I think it's been on a couple of slides, is we have to pray. We have to pray. What should we be praying for our kids? And let's just go ahead. I'll just put you on the spot. You can answer that. I could have asked you some really awkward questions. This is an easy one, okay? What should we be praying for our kids? Huh? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I want y'all to talk. Confidence. What else?
That they would love the Lord more than anything.
They surround themselves with good people. Make good decisions.
Discernment.
That God would use them for His glory.
You know, there was a time that I think I was praying, God, please help Will not to have sex before he's married. Now, with all the prayer, please help my child not to struggle with homosexuality. Please help, and I'm like, I don't pray that anymore. I pray what you're talking about. I pray statements like to know and to follow Jesus. To know how much they are loved by God. I pray that there'll be a light in the world for goodness and be filled with a non-negotiable joy. Okay? Not happiness. Okay? I don't mean that. We've already talked about that today. Not just a happiness. Like it's just different inside of them. Not don't be this person. Or don't be like this. Or don't have this struggle. I may be the only one that struggles with that. We have to remember this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. Okay, we talk about projecting things, and a lot of times we struggle with that more than our kid does, and so therefore we're doing that. But it's a marathon, not a sprint. When something happens with our 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, we go, well, I've got to fix this up right now, and just get in here. And okay, that's how we'll do. I know, I get it. I do the same thing. most of the time. But what you got to remember is we're trying to raise good 30 and 40-year-olds. That's what we're trying to do. Okay? So that one thing when they were 12 is not the end of the world. Okay? We've got to think long term here. And ultimately, our goal is we want to have them so they know they can come to us always to be loved, to be cared for, and also that they're going to be able to be listened to. Like, I want my kids to want to call me when things get tough. Not, Dad's just going to give me another sermon if I call him. Or I know what he's going to say about this. He's going to say, you were stupid, you should have not done this. And how, you know, we want to build a relationship where they always want to come back to us when they're going through tough stuff. And then we need to show them that God's way, and when I say them, I'm not just talking about our kids, I'm talking about the world, that God's way is a better way. Okay? We're not saying we hate people that do this, we hate people that do this. No. We're saying this is a better way. In fact, I read recently in a book I was reading, it says the 2nd century martyrs who were fighting the pagan Greek culture, they did not spend any of their time arguing or denouncing the evils of the empire or the king. They didn't do that. What they did was, rather they argued and showed that Christians made the best citizens, the best parents, the best neighbors, and the best employees. It was different. You do God's plan, it's different. And it's a better way. Let me ask you this, and then I'm going to close in a word of prayer. Do you guys have, I'm going to take you through some resources that I love and that I recommend, but do you guys have resources when you talk about talking to your kids about sex, when you talk about, I don't know, changing body, talk about gender stuff? Anybody in here have good resources that you could recommend to us? That's amazing. Good job, guys. Just kidding. Okay, let me give you a couple of quick ones here. I talked to you about Preparing for Adolescence by Dr. James Dobson. Here's another one that I read years ago. It's so good. It's called Hooked. And it's ultimately, it's not even written from a Christian perspective, but it's written from a Christian perspective. It's talking about what all is happening emotionally and mentally when two adults have sex, and how that really, really creates an amazing bond. Okay? Just like God intended it to do. And that when that happens, and that's not your spouse, and it does this, and that happens, and it's not your spouse, and it does this, eventually it's like tape. It just does not stick. Okay? You don't have to read it now. That's the whole point of the book. Yes? Do you have a resource?
Irreversible damage.
Okay? Irreversible damage. All right, another one is called Embodied, and it's by Preston Sprinkle. I really, really like Preston Sprinkle. When I first started this journey and diving in, I wanted somebody that did not have any skin in the game. I went to a lot of mentors, and they were like, hey, read this book, Casey. This is a preacher that has always preached against it, but one of his children have struggled with it, and now has come out, and now the preacher talks about he's seen a different way, and I'm like, I want to hear from somebody that has no skin in the game. Okay? They just want to love people well, and Preston does a great job of that. He's cool, and he's young, and I thought, it's going to say, you know, God has opened the door up, it's different now in our time, we're supposed to love, and he sticks to truth. But he is also very gracious, and he gives you some hard questions as a Christian. Like, I don't know. Like, I probably don't handle that well. But he's written one called Embodied. That's my favorite one. He's written one, it says it's for kids living in a gray world. I recommend it. And then he has another one called People to be Loved. All those are very, very good. One is Jason recommended to me. It's called Strange New World by Carl Trueman. And Jason, what's the original one called? Yeah.
That's the longer one by Truman.
Yeah, it's a long book by Truman. Just type that in, you'll find it. And it's Trueman. But either way, Jason gave me the 400-page one, and told me to go read that. And I'm like, but I like that stuff. I like the research. And then as I was buying that, I saw one of his buddies went to him and said, "This is unbelievable information. Nobody's ever going to read it. Like, it's too researchy. It's too." And so he condensed it to 200 pages. And I'm telling you, A Strange New World, it is gold to show you how we have gone through time and gotten to this cultural moment that we're in now.
Rise and triumph of the modern self.
Yeah, rise and triumph of the modern self. Yeah, that's going to the beach. You just want something to read. Yeah.
There's a book, Gay Girl, Good God.
Okay.
That's really good.
Gay Girl, Good God.
Yeah. It's about a woman who identified as gay and her journey of coming back to God's truth, and she eventually married, had children, and stepped back over the line that you were talking about. So just her perspective and journey.
Gay guy. Gay girl, good God. Sorry. I'm normally taking a nap here at this time. Okay? This is very, very tough to even be upright right now. All right, and then the other one that you heard me talk about earlier is Love Thy Body. It's by Nancy Percy. And yeah, it's very, very good too. All right, let me pray over us, and then we're going to be dismissed. I really, really appreciate the opportunity, and I know we're just barely getting started on some of this stuff. And I would love to talk to more people, especially if I said something today and you're like, "Casey, I don't believe that part. Like, I've got a different view on that." Some of the people, well, there's no doubt, the people that challenge me the most are the people that I love and respect, but we just don't match up on what we believe all the time. Okay? And that helps me grow. And I want to hear stuff like that. And I want to pray a verse over you out of Philippians 2. Okay? So let's bow our head. I'll start with this, and then I'll close this out in prayer. It says, in Philippians 2:14 and 15, it says this: "Do everything without murmuring or questioning the providence of God, so that you may prove yourself to be blameless and guileless and innocent and uncontaminated children of God, without blemish in the midst of a morally crooked and spiritually perverted generation, among whom you are seen as bright lights, beacons shining out clearly in a world of darkness."